I mean, the initial days are very tough, right? Because, especially for us, we're just building the product. And then, the economy was crashing down in late 2022, right? And it was tough.
Welcome to the next episode of the Entrepreneurial Excellence podcast. It is with great pleasure that I have Nabin Banskota with me today. He is a three-time founder, currently the president and co-founder and president of Neural, which is basically an HR platform. I know you're going to tell us a ton more about it. But part of why I wanted to have you on the show today, Nabin, was the fact that you're an immigrant founder from Nepal, employ lots of people in Nepal still. You've been in the United States, of course, for a long period of time. You've also co-founded two of your three companies with your wife. I think the third one you co-founded with your brother. So keeping things sort of a family operation, which some people might say is really smart and other people might say is a terrible idea because if it goes wrong, you still have family gatherings and you can't kind of get your co-founder. But either way, it is fantastic to have you with me today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Great to be here. And let's kick it off with so I came to US about 25 years ago, and then when I came to the US, I always had this dream of being an entrepreneur and starting my own companies. And one of the things that all of the immigrant founders will run into pretty fast is when you come to the US, you go through college, and then you have to go through this visas process, which is a little bit ridiculous, to be honest with you. But, they are what they are, and you have to kind of go through that. So it took me a little bit of a time to get to, understand the ecosystem here, the finance. Obviously, I worked in finance for a long time, so it gave me a great entry into, how things work financially and whatnot. So, but once again, I think my story of starting three companies from scratch would not be possible in a lot of other countries, right? In US, one of those countries where genuinely you can actually do that. You just need an idea. You actually don't need any money, and if you have an idea, you can go and pursue your dreams. So for that, I'm very thankful that I'm here and I'm still living here, right? So it's been
totally. So a lot of things I want to ask about that, but before we go deeper on that front, a question I like to kick off the podcast with every single time is, this is the Entrepreneurial Excellence podcast, right? You look up to, and I think you probably are, an excellent entrepreneur, but how do you define that? When you think through defining excellence, what does that actually mean?
I mean, I think it's very relative. For a lot of people, it's been something different. For me, just starting a company, and I had a couple of passions, right? So a tea company came out of passion, but the harvest also came out of passion to really help the end consumer. So for me, it's a mix of both worlds, right? One, something that I wanted to do and something that actually drives me every single day, and then actually realistically help people. But at the same time, there should be some financial metrics in terms of how successful the company is as well. So it's a combination of two. It doesn't have to be a multi-billion-dollar outcome, but as long as you're happy with the outcome and you actually genuinely solve problem for other people or other folks or whatever the problem might be, I think I would define that, right? And in terms of the outcome is relative depending upon who you ask.
But so solving problems for other people, basically.
Absolutely. Solving problems for other people is something that drives me. And I think if I can do that with some meaning, with some, financial upside there too, I think, that is an excellence for me.
So walk us back to sort of the beginning of your career, right? So you moved to the US. What made you decide to move to the US? Why even make that jump? I mean, it's not an easy jump for a lot of people, probably even more rare for people from Nepal. Why even make that move over here and then take that, I'm sure your parents are like, well, we want you to be a doctor or a consultant, and you probably were a good son and you went into banking for almost 10 years. So like you did the good son thing, but like what made you move over here in the first place? Like what was the push to
So growing up in Nepal, I actually went to the only Catholic school in Nepal. It's called St. Xavier's, so I had access, and I basically interacted with a lot of the brothers, fathers, folks from US and Canada. And then I was kind of like, studying at school where they prioritize not just studies, but they actually prioritize all the sports and everything else. So I actually played sports in high school, basketball, soccer.
That sounds normal to US people. Like
that is not normal. That is very rare in Nepal. There's only I think 25 years ago, there was only one school that was pursuing that, which was St. Xavier's in Nepal. And but other colleges and universities have kind of like adopted now. But it was very rare to see that, and that probably attracted me to to go into that school. And that gave me a sense of like, obviously in Nepal, you grow up, the two things you want to be, one is doctor or engineer. Every family dreams of that. For me, in my family, sort of comes with my dad. He's an entrepreneur himself. He never had a real job in his life, so he never told me like do this and do that. He was always like, whatever you want to do, I want you to do it with your heart, with your passion, and do it right. Right. So that kind of like helped me like basically screw around and basically try different things. And lo and behold, like I think I made a decision to like randomly come to US with one of my other friends. Like, hey, I'm not going to study science or doctors, whatever. So I want to go into like finance. I want to go into economics. I want to go into business, right? So, and that actually prompted me to come to US, to study, bachelor's here. And then that was the reason I was here like 20 years ago.
In going back to school for a second too, like a few questions. Like one, why, like as a high school or middle school or whenever you started going to your school, why go to that school? Like, was it your parents sort of like, hey, like this is a great school? Were you Catholic? Was that the reason? What was the underlying reason where like, hey, we're going to make this decision, go to this foreign sort of?
So I'm not a Catholic, but the reason to go to that school is like something attracted me about that school is like what they're not basically prioritizing studies, but rather than all around thing with sports and everything else, like a team environment, that sort of thing. I was not like the top 1% in my high school as well. I was kind of like in the middle, but I was the guy who would go out, would play sports, teams, and I was good at like other things. I was not the Dr. Caliber type of thing in when I grew up. So because I was like, I hung out with people like that, and that was the school to be because, frankly, the kids in the schools are cool and, they're not considered like gigs and whatever. So that made me to go to that school. And before that, I went to a couple of different schools as well, but I started in St. James, like starting grade five. But and from five to we'll call it like grade 10, is basically I spent there, and it was a wonderful time, right? I still enjoy that. I still love that. I still went to that school. I had great memories of going to that school.
And so then talk about your father as well a little bit more. So is it relatively rare in Nepal to be an entrepreneur, or is everyone sort of an entrepreneur, right? Even if you're a farmer, you're kind of an entrepreneur too. What's the mindset that's sort of normal in Nepal?
So in Nepal, like it is rare to be an entrepreneur, but everybody wants like some sort of job, like some sort of stable income. But there are folks who would never take a job just because like either they have wealth or whatever. So it's also true that a lot of folks are entrepreneur in Nepal, but there's a difference, right? There's a difference between like getting involved in a family business or starting something new. I think my dad started about I don't know 20 different things.
Wow.
And I think he failed in like probably 18 of those, but you're
right. That's about the same rate as every entrepreneur.
Exactly. I mean, like pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. And, he made some decisions like, in his 20s, 30s. I think that made him really, really successful. Like, moving away from the village that was born to like, a big city early in the days, like buying real estate, in the big city, those type of things. And then starting like a tea company when I was born like 40 years ago, basically to help the increase the living standards of the villagers as well. So yeah, like, and you want to do like full organic, yeah, like really bold vision and futuristic vision, coming out of like, that particular pocket of Nepal as well. So he really helped me kind of, understand the value of, doing what motivates you, doing what you're passionate about, and not really going for these, doctors and engineers that everybody wants you to be, right? So it's finding a passion within and then pursuing that.
Do you think there was anything that made him different? Like why was he, I mean, this goes for not just Nepalese parents, but like any parent, like what made him have that different mindset, especially because it sounds like based on what you're describing, he was he didn't come from any money. And so he's going to do this something that's really scary. And maybe he had enough success when you went to go do it. You had at least, you weren't going to go hungry the next day. Whereas it felt like maybe with your dad, when he failed, it was unclear where you were going to get your next meal from. What do you think gave him that drive?
I think, there was a rebel in himself. Like he always, he studied well. I think, he wanted to help the folks in the village. He wanted to help the folks in the city. he was like, in social service and other things like from very, very early on. So one thing led to another thing. He was always looking for solutions to how to make the lives better and better and better. And I think that just led him to more things, and that just led him to like ask more questions and start finding solutions for others. And then also, I think, he saw in early days that, you really need to go to university. It was very rare for people in his, village to go to the university. So he was probably one of the first one to go to the university. And it's also because of that, I think he got exposure to other things like outside of, what he was living, that, okay, there's a bigger, a dream, and there's a bigger things that he can do coming out of that. So I think he fought with his family to literally leave the village and go to the city. And I think that transpired many things for it.
And then so you grew up in the city and your parents were like, hey, this is a good school. We think you should go there. You end up going to the Catholic school, get exposed to more stuff. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to go make the jump to the US. And how many people did you move to the US knowing anyone else, or you're just kind of...
Absolutely no. So randomly, we landed in Kansas in the middle of the snowstorm.
Wait, explain randomly. I had no idea some plane from Nepal just randomly ended up in Kansas. I mean, I know like...
Yeah, we it was we thought when I was 25 years ago, the world wasn't this global, right? And I thought like, oh, everyone in US, like we had MTVs and things like that. We thought everybody's like that, right? So, but when we landed first semester, for at Wichita State University, I came there because one, it was like known to be a good school in Nepal. Like somebody knew about Wichita State. I had some scholarship there as well. So, and then turns out when I landed in January 9th, it was a snowstorm. The entire city was locked down. And then the only thing, they dropped us in the dorms. The only thing available was like the McDonald's, like, half a mile down. So you have to walk back. And then by the time you come back, you're already hungry, right? And those were my 3 dark days, which I was like, you know what? I think I should probably go back. Like, I always went back. Thankfully, I had a friend who came with me from Nepal as well. So it kind of helped us a little bit more. But that was the first 3 days was like, crazy. I never expected, snowstorm, the dark, like Wichita is like, small university town, everything shut down. It was insane.
I mean, I don't know a lot about Nepal, but Nepal is pretty high up. Like there's a lot of snow in Nepal, right?
Yeah, so I grew up in Kathmandu, which is like a big city with 6 million people. So you actually have everything and anything there. But obviously, you go to the mountainside. Obviously, there's a lot of snow. There's the 8 of the 10 tallest mountains are in Nepal, so it's a mountainous country. But because I grew up in a big city like Kathmandu, which is almost like New York City, so for me coming from Kathmandu to Wichita was just like it was a complete shock.
Many different ways.
Complete comes together, many different ways. Yeah.
Okay, so you're at Wichita State, and then you study, you get your graduate degree. Why, like, given your dad's background, what you were doing, all that other stuff, you went straight into finance pretty much after that?
Yeah. So, and I actually didn't like Wichita, so I actually ended up transferring to University of Colorado, right after the semester. And then I was there for about 3 years. I loved Colorado there. Yeah, Colorado in Boulder. I loved it because
Well, not as much. Probably, maybe the weather's a little bit better. It's cold. It's cold in Boulder as well, but not quite.
it's definitely cold, but they're kind of like mountains, a big city. Like, it was more relatable to, what I was used to. There are a lot of Nepalese community there too. I think that also helped us out a little bit as well. And I loved the school. The school was great. And then randomly, like, I had this professor who really liked me because I was in economics class, and he invited me to his Thanksgiving. I went there, and he basically started talking about, oh, what do you want to do, like, when you graduate and things like that. I told him I eventually want to work in Wall Street, and he basically told me, you are in the wrong place. Hey, you have to go to New York. We really want to work in Wall Street. And his wife actually worked at Wall Street before, and they kind of like double down on the idea that he should really leave, because if you graduate from here, the chances of getting to Wall Street like literally nil or maybe 1%. And so I basically packed my bags next semester and moved to New York. I was like, and I went to a college called Baruch, a college here in Manhattan. I ended up graduating from there, and that's my entry into the Wall Street.
So you transferred you went to 3 different schools.
3 different schools in the U.S. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so sort of slowly making it from small city to small town to sort of small city to like New York, and then you graduate.
Yeah, and when I came to New York, I kind of felt home because the Kathmandu is very much similar to New York, or the other way around, because it's a big city. You have everything, tons of people walk around and that sort of thing. And I think I found it home after 4 years in New York City, and I liked it and loved it. It was a little bit of a culture shock coming from Colorado to New York and the other way down as well, because we know how fast the city is, and people are pushing and subbing in subways and things like that. But I got used to it. And Baruch was an excellent choice for me because he was in Manhattan. They have lots of opportunities to go work, do an internship with these big Wall Street firms. So I got an internship in my last semester. I think it was like Prudential Financial, and then that got me into the into the finance.
Nice. Okay. So you get into finance. You're in there for like 10 years.
Yeah, almost. Started in 2007, and I was there for 2018, like almost 11 years. And I also worked for like three different firms because every firm that I went to, for me, I was like, I want to grow fast. I want to move up, like, that kind of hunger I had. And then, all of a sudden, like, I didn't saw that. And in the middle of the, 2008 and 9, there was a big financial crisis as well. So there's a lot of unknown. So I actually had to go through all of that. I started really amazing time, like 2007, one of the best time to work in Wall Street. And then 8 and 9, it was like the crappiest time to work.
I mean, if you managed to keep your job through that period, you were pretty good at your job if you kept your job.
Somehow, I don't know how, but I was able to kept my job. And then I actually transferred to JP Morgan from KPMG. That was my first job at KPMG transaction services, because I couldn't get to a true investment banking job, and then went to JP Morgan in alternative investments. And then that opened up a lot of doors for me because I actually went to Citi Private Bank within the alternative investments. They were kind of like rebuilding the business after the financial crisis. And that actually spoke to me, right? Because I always wanted to build something, do something like, a little bit more entrepreneurial. So that offered me an opportunity to build something within the large financial, institution, because they're rebuilding the asset management business after the financial crisis. And I was the first finance guy they hired. So obviously that was a great learning experience for me to be able to build like even a team or a small business within a large bank. And I remember being like one person on my day one. And when I walked out after 8 years, I rose through the ranks, became a CFO of that division, managing 30 billion assets across, private equity, real estate, venture capital. Everything was very new to me. I didn't know about any of these things because in school you don't learn about private equity and venture capital and all that stuff. But it was a phenomenal journey. I became, almost like a chief compliance officer, broker dealer, managing broker dealer. I was leading OCC and all these other crazy audits, for the city private advisory. So it was a very good experience. But at the same time, in 2017, I started looking out because by that time I already had green cars, so that I can actually free to go work for anywhere else.
Yep.
And basically I could actually start a company. So I started looking into different ideas, and then that's when in 2017, my brother graduated from school here in the US as well. And we always talked about, kind of like doing something with our, family business, which is a tea business in Nepal. We have a tea plantation that my dad started 40 years ago. And we always wanted to get those tea in the US and cut all the middlemen, and then, because there was not a lot of volume, like maximize the profit and help actually raise the living standards of farmers and everybody else. That was the idea. So took us a while to get going, but my brother actually went to Nepal, studied tea for about 6 months, came back, said this is what I wanted to do. So we jointly started the company in 2017. So I was still at Citi when we started that company because there was no conflict for us to do that, because it was a tea venture outside of what I was doing. And my brother wasn't.
Citi was probably focused on.
Yeah, because there was some conflict with another company that I was trying to be part of before that, but they didn't allow me for that. But at least they allowed me to be part of the Nepal tea venture. So we started that, in 2017. And, today, like even after 8 years, I think one of the best companies coming out of Nepal to be able to bring teas. We even a partnership with Starbucks, like we do a lot of blendeds, So there's been a lot going on.
So it's grown. So I mean, what can you talk about, like the growth of that? So how big did it grow? How many people did you add? How deeply were you involved versus really being your brother and you were maybe kind of the financial guy for a little while and helping out?
Yeah, so the first year or so, I was a little bit more very involved. And when I left in 2018, my corporate job, I was a little bit more involved. But, I'm still on the board, helping with a lot of different things. But he's kind of running, everything, since like 19 or 20. But the company has grown to 60 some people. I think they do $3 to $4 million of revenue. It's a very niche product, right? And then really the satisfaction actually comes out of that because we have helped like thousands of farmers. I think We have supported like 2,000 students in a graduate from our scholarship program through that company. We help farmers provide them a free housing. We did a lot of like social initiative within the company as well. So it's really a feel good stories, and we never wanted to sell that anyway, right? So we're adding more and more farms. So that is going really well now. It has picked up a lot of steam in the last couple of years.
How do you, I mean, this kind of maybe plays into your company after it, but like, how does a consumer company like that, a tea company in what was arguably a pretty busy space, how do you stand out? Like, what does that make you? You're like, okay, I need to make sure we can stand out as a company because there's lots of teas. I bought, or it's the holidays right now. I bought I love having different teas and having different breakfast drinks. And I probably have like a million different drinks in the morning. I'm not just a coffee person like some people are. And so I have a lot of different tea and I try all these different teas. But how do you stand out? How do you know, how do you as a business stand out in that market?
So the good thing that was helped us with Nepal teas, because the teas were grown right next to Darjeeling in India. So in Nepal, it's a close border, right? And the quality was there. It just the name wasn't there, right? So Darjeeling used to buy all the teas from Nepal side of it, branded out Darjeeling teas and sell it at thousands of dollars.
That's hilarious.
And literally, so that's literally happens, right? And then I think in a couple of years they stopped it because there was this article in the news where there were twice as more Darjeeling teas were sold than actually produced, and the government actually had to stop that. But so the quality was always there. It was a matter of like marketing directly to the U.S. consumer market, and then also in the U.S. Like if we imagine like 2015, 16, the tea culture has picked up a lot, right? Because a lot of people now drink green tea and white tea that exposed to like various different type of teas. So there's obviously a lot of growth that are happening in orthodox, like this very specialty type of teas in the US, and that has helped us, to grow that business as well. But really, like, it's really about one branding, and we also had a really good story, right? Because all of the farmers are also the owners of the company. We provide them a lot of scholarships. There's a Transparency Act. There's a barcode that you can scan. You can see where it's coming from. So we provide a lot of transparency into where the tea is coming from. And now we're helping the actual farmers behind the scene as well. So a lot of people buy because of that. But also, and now we've been winning one of our tea just won like one of the best gold tea of the entire world in London, I think, 2 months ago. So we've been winning a lot of these competitions because the quality is really there. It's just the marketing and the access to the market that was lacking.
So are there any key things? I mean, most, I think our audience is probably more on the tech side, but like, I think just the consumer side is really interesting too. Are there elements or things you learned either that you would have done differently or would have preferred to do, or lessons learned, or it's just like, hey, stick with it. And you've been at it for so long now and things are starting, maybe, trends pick up so you can ride that wave. And then also obviously just the product quality and your name gets out there and it just slowly builds. Or what lessons do you have for consumer entrepreneurs?
Yeah, consumers is very difficult, right? Because there is access to capital is not that much, and you really need to have a passion about what you want to do there. Because the consumer to growing a consumer's company, a lot of things has to go right, especially in the CPG side, because you're dealing with food and stuff. There's so many other regulations that are involved as well. So one, really understanding, the product itself and, the market, I think that's really, really key. And then the second thing is if you're doing like this cross border, I think we underestimated the supply chain in the beginning. I think, being able to understand the supply chain, like how the, tea comes and the pricing and everything else. And by the time you get to the final market, what the cost is going to be, I think that is something that everybody needs to understand really well, because now it's a little bit easier, but when we started 7-8 years ago, it's actually very difficult. You have to go through brokers and things like that. Sometimes you're so passionate about the product, you forget the ins and out of it, and that makes a huge difference whether your company is successful or not.
And so you're basically saying you need to understand, okay, well, it's manufactured, in your case in Nepal, of course, but let's say China or wherever else, it then needs to get shipped across the US, needs to get to the store, it needs to get to retail. There's markups throughout the process where you need to make sure you're getting your enough back so you can still do your own marketing and pay your team and everything else. And so sort of pricing it properly.
Yeah, that one. And then the second one is, because the US, if you go to an end consumer market, it's usually dominated by the distributor. So if you go sell it to a distributor, if you don't have a lot of volume, it actually does not make sense. At that point, it's like, go uphill battle or trying to, get shelf space, right? So that's also another thing you have to understand what channel that you're going to sell it to. And that's how you should devise all of your pricing strategy around it. And then the last thing is like, if we're talking about food, there's tons of regulations involved. The moment the product crosses one country to another country, so just be understanding the regulations in there. Because in US, there's a huge regulations about anything that's coming out overseas, especially on the food side, if there's any plants or meat or whatever. I mean, that was not the case for us, but we still had to go through so many of those things. So those can also bog down your, vision, and, you have a great product. You see, like, there's a lot of demand for it. It's just the logistics and all these other things in between can play a big role. So just having a deep understanding of that would help, like, overcome a lot of challenges.
All right. So are there any key takeaways from that business? So for consumer founders out there, any key takeaways, like lessons learned or things you would have done differently to make it more, it sounds like it's going well, but to make it even more successful than it.
Yeah, I mean, it took us a little bit of a while. I think, once again, I think, you have to, for CPG type of product, you really need to, have a conviction or understanding on day one, like, how are you going to market that, right? So if you're going to go individually, now we can do a lot of e-commerce. That's a very, very different strategy, and you have to, work very differently. If we're going to go through a distributor, if we're going to go through, like, direct to consumers through all these other channels, I think that part is very important, like how you market the product, because that's so important in consumer business. So having a clear strategy around that would actually help you become, more successful. We tried lots of different things in the beginning, and, a lot of things did not work. But finally, we found something that really works. So it took us a little while for that. So my advice would be, like, just understand from your product perspective, what do you want to sell it? Who are your end customers, and how do you want to distribute that? That's really key from day one.
Nice. Okay. So the Paul T Collective's running, doing its thing. You're helping your brother out. What then makes you decide to start Harvest, right? Which gets acquired by Acorns. Maybe just before you explain why you got it started, give a little more background on it again. I mean, so how big did Harvest get? How many, like, approximately how much revenue? How many people on the team?
Yeah.
And then
Absolutely.
What made you kind of walk us backwards? Like, what made you decide to sell it? And then we'll go back to the beginning and why you started it.
Yeah. So the selling part was interesting because Harvest was a B2C consumer fintech company. But what we were doing in 2018 is we actually built like a super agent, like an AI agent that used natural language processing using, and that was something that nobody has done. Like a lot of the VCs didn't even understood like what we have built. We had like own mini LLM that went through chatbot to banks and automatically negotiate their account fees, maintenance fees, all those other fees directly with the banking consumers.
Why
and get the money back to them, right? So that was the reason we wanted to, we did that is obviously Nami, my wife, was at Twitter. She was exposed to this transformer model back in 2018 that just came out. And that is the foundation for all of these LLMs today.
Yeah, of course.
And she understood that. And we basically use, natural language processing, machine learning was, something that was starting to come up at that time. And so we utilized that to build that bot to automatically negotiate those fees. There are other companies who are kind of doing that, but they're doing very manual, right? They have a call center in Philippines and blah, blah, blah. And we're like, can't scale business like that. We need a true tech product. And it took us about 9 months to build that automated product. But, that's what we did. And then I think at scale, we are like at $8 or $9 million in ARR. And that happened within like 28 months period with a 12-person team. So it was a truly rocket shift that happened. During the pandemic, a lot of the banks were like very generous in terms of refunding the end customers' fees, account fees, maintenance fees. We're also featured in CNBC, Forbes, like, good, like companies actually helping consumers get their money back. That sort of thing that helps us, like, because we're marketing through Facebook and Instagram. And by the way, at that time, Facebook marketing worked wonderfully well. It can literally pinpoint who you want to market it to, right? That you can't do that anymore, but that really worked for us. And because of that, because of the model, because of everything that we built, the truly was a scalable product. And it was like 12-person team doing like an $8 million in ARR.
That's insane. I mean, that's the margins were insane on that. You're crushing it.
Absolutely.
So then why sell? Like you sold.
Yeah, so we realized like, this business, like at some point the bank's gonna come back, like, maybe they'll basically shut us down and blah 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 because, like, so there was some risk to the business, right? So what we ended up doing is
But there's
we
risk in
wanted to,
business, right? There's every
yeah,
business has.
absolutely. Yeah, every business has a risk. And this one, even though banks are working with us as like a third party independent agent that can actually validate where some of these transactions are. They'd actually used us as like a something where they'll go to the regulator and basically say, "Oh, we're working with these guys, and they're actually helping us figure out these issues." Right? The fees is a money making for banks. Like if you go to banks, they're making $6 to $10 billion a year just on these fees. So
Let's make sure I understand. Like these are like fees like just to have a checking account or.
yeah, pretty much. You go to Bank of America, Wells Fargo, like here's a free checking account. You know what ended up happening? The average consumers used to pay like $786 to those checking account. That's standard per year, absolutely, and that's what we found out. And actually, we didn't start with that idea, by the way. So the idea that we started at Harvest was we're actually going to build a robo advising platform for women. So if they spend money, in like pleasure, 10% of that would automatically go to this investing and mutual funds and things like that. That was the original idea, and we started getting data through Plaid. We kept bumping into like this other data, right? Because at that point, in 2018, even the banks, they would give you the data through Plaid because the GDPR just came out and consumers own their data, and we got the data, but we couldn't get this like the last 10% like these other. So we investigated, and it turns out all of these other things are actually fees that consumer paid for a so-called a free checking account. We started calling the bank, and they would like return the money right away, no questions asked.
Really? So they're basically stealing.
Absolutely.
They don't
Bring your lunch.
once you figure it out. Well, once you figured out that we're stealing from you, we'll give you your money back.
So, but then, like you and me, like we're so busy, we don't have time to like call bank for 10, $15. So, but it adds up. It adds up every single month. And we also found out these banks were like using what's called a layering technique to be able to, charge overdraft fees. Like basically, you wrote 3 checks, $1,000, $20, $10. Guess what they will do? Regardless of when you wrote it, they'll actually clear the large one first, so they can charge overdraft fees for the other 2. Like there are like tons of tricks that they're deploying so that they can maximize these fees. And that's what we found out. We called, a lot of the banks, and literally free. American Express, Discover, Wells Fargo was the biggest one, Bank of America, just all of them. And we basically use the AI to completely automate that process from end to end, right? So customers
bank up and be like, "Hey, you're charging Joe."
Yeah,
you charge. Do it pretending to be Joe, or you would call on like Joe's behalf.
So we did it through chatbot. We didn't even call anyone.
Oh, that's even better. So you could do it on a chatbot. You would after we logged into their account, the chat agent on the other side would think it was them, and you'd be like,
absolutely.
I noticed you charged me for this. What is it? And they'll be like, "Oh, so sorry, we'll refund it."
So that was the AI agent that we built using natural language processing that took us about 9 months to go from like 70% to like 99% accurate. The customers would come in to Harvest. They'll put in their, instruction, like banking instruction, give us consent to negotiate on their behalf. Our chatbot would go directly to bank's chatbot, automatically negotiate with them as if it's a human, and then get the money back directly to the bank checking account. And then we took, I think, like 15 or 20% off, whatever we refund to them, right?
So it's like easy money. You're saving it's a win-win because the person's getting money back. You build the software, you get some money on the side for the work that you did. Absolutely. By the way, just a small pet peeve. I feel like banks still do this today.
Oh, of course they do. Like, of course they do that.
We're both in the business space, and I won't call anyone out by name, but like there are banks out there that give you 0 interest rate on your cash, at least for the first few $100,000. And I tell founders all the time, I'm like, so are you okay paying them 30 to 40 grand a year for their services? Like if you are, then all good. But if not, why would you ever go with that bank? Why don't you get a bank that is going to pay you a lot of interest and is just really careful about their own costs so they can pay that back? So like we use it at Levy, we use a bank that we get interest on the first dollar in,
of course,
all the way through. And we use an MMA account for even higher fees and like all, all that stuff. And it's just shocking me how many founders don't pay attention. I'm like, you're sitting on
that's a lot of money.
Interest rates, 40 grand a year for your cash sitting there, or you're paying that to the bank because they're just not paying it to you and they're keeping it for their own fees to provide whatever they claim are their services. And it's total racket.
That's why, like, some of these neo banks have, like, grown to be like multi-billion-dollar businesses, because now they're offering, interest, versus you go to JP Morgan and others, they don't offer you interest, right? It's no brainer for startup companies to go and do that. Even at a consumer level, it's starting to happen. They're like newer banks who actually offer you, 3, 4, 5%. They're investing this money in treasury anyway, right? So
Right, they'll still make,
they still make they still make a margin on it. So yeah, I mean, that was the thing. And people had inertia, right? They just don't have time. They are afraid to call banks, whatever it is. And most of the customers were like paycheck to paycheck customers. Even worse, they hate calling up that bank. So that was the reason. That was the reason why we automated the entire thing. All they have to do is like come in and just give their credentials, and our bot will do everything. And in 24 hours, they have the money back.
So that's amazing. But like, so walk me through. Like, sounds like you're crushing it, right? I mean, like, you must have raised some money. You have a 12-person team. You're making $9 million in ARR. I mean, why?
Yeah, we did raise from, I think Kleiner Perkins was that investor. Obviously we were part of like Techstars, Barclays, and Acorns.
Great people. You're crushing it. Your margins are insane. Like, that's the ARR number with that small of a team. Amazing. This problem.
But So
why sell?
Yeah. So interesting question. Interesting, right? Because we saw this business is doing really well, but at some point we thought that the banks didn't come and shut us down, right? So we needed to build something using this, build something else. And our thought process was, okay, let's build like a pure no fee checking account, and no overdraft fees account, and kind of like built a neobank around it, right? So we actually worked with Visa and others to actually release that. And we're about to sign a term sheet, Laura's term sheet to do this as well, because the traction was there, everything else was there. So these same consumers are going to be the customers anyway for this bank and debit card. And Acorns was an investor from, the Acorns CEO was a personal investor and advisor to us from day one. And they tried to buy us out, like, I don't know, I can't remember, like fourth or fifth time before this as well, right? Because they loved what we did. They loved our product. They're like, okay, we do this exact thing. We actually help the B2B. We actually help like paycheck to paycheck customers save money, right? That's the business model. They loved what we did. So they thought it was a match in heaven to bring our technology and put it into Acorns. We didn't agree to sell them for the fourth or fifth time. And then at the point of, raising Series A capital, one of the investors basically, Acorns basically came up and said, look, let's make a deal. What can we do to, get you guys, in Acorns? Because if we can bring your product here, we can do a massive damage. We can actually serve these customers. And we liked Acorns. They have a really good brand name. They were not like super high valued at that time as well. We had interest from others as well, because the one, we're like, if we're going to sell it, let's just get some other interests too. Like, we have interest from other neobanks and others too, but we ended up making a decision to go with Acorns. And the sweet note was, we were able to get equity of Acorns, right? We're like, okay, Acorns going to go big. They're probably going to
That's the risk too, right? I mean, you're taking equity in someone else, you're betting on them. You don't really, they make, of course, when someone's courting you, they're like, oh, we're the best ever, we're the best team. You don't really know, and you come on board, and next thing you know.
No, the idea was we're going to go and help them do that as well, right? That was the idea. And obviously it was not the 100% equity deal. I think it was like 70-30 or something like that.
So 30% cash, or the other way.
Cash, yeah. Yeah, 70% equity, 30% cash. And we got enough cash, right? So we're like, okay, I think we're going to go work for them. We're just going to build this business. Acorns had already doing, hundreds of millions of revenue anyway. So we knew they were going to go public at some point, and it's pretty undervalued as well. So we saw huge potential in them too. And, they had 6 million customers. They could easily use our product, right? So I think they did use our, product to basically up the tier from like $3 to like $9, and didn't take any of the fees. So they upped the tier. And
that's what but it was free. So it was a good acquisition.
It was a really good acquisition. And I didn't join Acorns, but Nami did, and the rest of the team joined them as well. And I was already looking for something else to do after that, right?
Before we move off that though, so in retrospect, was that the right decision? Do you feel good about it? I don't know how Acorns has done as a publicly traded company. Like, has it done pretty well?
They haven't gone public yet. They were supposed to go public in 2022. I think they pulled it the last day, but they haven't gone public yet, like everybody did, right? So they haven't gone public. But when they do go public, it's going to be a really good outcome for us. And then, it's only a matter of when, it's not if Acorns going public. So it was, I think, in hindsight, listen, could we have raised like, on the couple $1 billion, could have been a couple $1 billion companies with all the AI craze because we have a true AI product? Yes, but at that time, I think it was the best decision for us to, sell it to Acorns, because, we wanted to focus on something like really big and messy and has a big TAM and really give it like 10 plus years. So I think, it was the right thing for us to do. And, and that gave us rise to Neural.
So okay, so explain that too. So your most of your team gets acquired, goes over to Acorn. You don't.
Right.
What do you do then, right? Like, so you're working on this thing probably 70, 80 hours a week, boom, 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 and next thing you know, acquired, your wife's still working there, has a full-time job, and you're like, all right, hanging out. What am I going to do now? Like, how do you go keep founders so you're like going from one thing to the next? What do you do in that space?
I mean, I didn't do anything for a couple months, because I wanted to take some break. But, one thing what I wanted to get back into actually sales, because I've never done actual sales, like B2B sales. And the next company, because,
we had to get into it then. Why did you want
Yeah. So, right. So, because the idea was, we're going to start another company, right, on the B2B side. That was kind of like the idea. For some reason, we're a little bit tired of a consumer companies, B2C consumer companies.
It's what you knew.
I know. Yeah. But, we're like, you know what? I think, B2B companies it's interesting. Like, it's a different challenge. And I think, you could build an amazing, long lasting companies on the B2B side. So that was the thought process. So I actually took up a role with one of these, late stage fintech to lead their sales and strategy for the Americas. And that also meant like managing their sales team. And I didn't have sales experience, but I guess, they said I basically had that role. So, it was a good eye opening for me, like, how to sell it into the B2B space, and also understand the landscape in the payments, like, cross-border payments and whatnot, because that was one of the passion that we both had from like 2017, like, trying to start, payments company. And at that time, we did not do that. We started Harvest. So there was like underlying desire to kind of go after like cross-border payments. So that we both had that passion, right?
So walk me through the going back. So you're like, I take a few months off and now I want to learn. I've never been in B2B SaaS at all. I want to go learn how to do sales in general. How do you convince some company to let you come on board as their head?
They liked so they were selling to private equity firms, and I had all these relationships from my days at a CFO. I, invested with BlackRock and Blackstone. It was almost major private equity companies. So they're like, it was easy for me to like, hey, can you take up a meeting with me? Like, I've known you for 10 years. So I think, that relationship that I had with all of these alternative asset manager, that kind of, gave them comfort that I can really go and open the doors for them. And that's how, that ended up happening.
What did you learn about B2B sales? Like, are there any key lessons you learned and took away? And obviously you're doing the same thing at Neural. Yeah. Like, what lessons did you learn? Like, okay, this is a key thing with B2B sales, or why they're really hard or easy or just different. At least with consumer, pretty quickly whether consumer, you can run a test and within 24 hours if it's working. B2B SaaS, it might take you 6 months to have an idea.
Absolutely. So in B2B SaaS, one thing that I found very, very different is like, you go meet someone. It's like, for one, client, it could be like a 9-month process, right? And you have to do so many things. And sometimes you don't get, response. Like sometimes you don't know where things are really. Like you have no idea up until the last time they signed the deal, right? So, and then you're also competing with others. In consumers, yes, you are competing with others, but you have so many different tools. You test it out in real time. Like you can, the feedback will be so fast. In B2B, it's a relationship based, especially for the larger companies. Having that, start establishing, it's a long game. Like, establishing that relationship, being more humble. As a salesperson, you have to do so many things that I was not seriously used to. Like, like these prospecting and, going to people was very new to me, like getting rejections, like, people not replying. It was like, previously I was used to like calling people up and they're like, oh, sure, like, let's meet. But this was very, very different, right? So there are some key lessons there, and it's also relationship based, and it could take a long time. And the negotiations, right? Even after all of that, like in the contract negotiations are crazy with B2B companies, right? Because they could be wild card anytime that could kill the deal.
Yeah.
So there are like so many landmines that you have to navigate through to land a B2B sales versus consumers. You know, you just need a little bit more money and advertising budget to be able to like, test new things on the consumer side. It's also hard. Sometimes you may not, scale as you wanted to, but you have the right product. It's easy to do on the consumer side and B2B side. You could get a couple of clients easily, but it is a difficult motion, and you need like a lot of sales force to be able to do that.
So then why? So given everything you just described, I'd be like, man, it sounds like it totally sucks to do B2B sales. So like, why then go say I'm going to go build a company doing that requires B2B sales to go make it happen? Like, why would you? Given your success in previous realm.
So what happened was on the B2B side, there's a lot of disruption. A lot of these companies have not really adopted some of the technology that's fully available in the consumer side, like way, way, way before, right?
Like what?
And like we are finding out with the neural, like on HR and payroll and cross-border payments, like there are things that could be like done so seamlessly, but then like one company just do one thing. And there's another company just do another thing. And then now you have a collection of 7 SaaS products that don't talk to each other, and your life is hell. Right. So that's the opportunity I saw. That's the opportunity we saw, like at least in this space, that there's, and once again, like in this payroll HR space is like not new, it's old. And it hasn't been disrupted over a long, long time. Like an ADP is still the biggest company in this space over 70 years, right? Every other company look good.
But even the space, right? Like, so it's speaking of even like deciding on a space, right? It's okay. Yeah, I agree. ADP hasn't been disrupted fully, but you also have, you have really big competitors that are very sort of startup competitors that are successful, like Rippling and Augusto, all these other folks. And there's tons of other sort of folks trying to do payroll. Like you have JustWorks, I'm trying to like Sequoia One. There's so many companies. Yeah. So when you're thinking through, right, through being an entrepreneurial lens, right? Like how did you decide, hey, I'm going to go build a payroll company, maybe to help, focus a little bit more on overseas payments, but a payroll company, given the competitive landscape, like what were the mental models you used to make that decision and then convinced VCs that this was the right bet and you were the right person to go build that?
Yeah. So what transpired is this pandemic, right? So pandemic, basically what changed is there was an opening, because a lot of the companies, when they have payroll, they will never think about switching or whatever, right? It works, who cares? But after the pandemic, what happened? The world became global. Companies started hiring people from all over the world. And the companies that are existed before, like Paychex and Paycom and Plus and all these other bigger companies, legacy companies, they're used to like selling, their software only work if they're in one physical location, so a couple of locations. If people start moving rapidly from one place to another place or internationally, that's not how, that's not, their software can't support that. So there was a huge opening, and even Rippling, right? It took them a long time to find like product market fit. Even though they started in 2015, they only found product market fit really, scaling, only after pandemic, because that's where the true, value of the platform starting to show up, right? And if you look at these companies, Deal and Rippling, those are the two that we compete with. Deal started in 2019, right? So there's like, and this is like a huge industry. I can point you like that, hundreds of companies worth tens of billions of dollars, and they do one thing. They do so much manual thing. And the company that I work for called TMF Group, operating in 200 different countries, have no technology, all manual. And they service companies like Amazon. Amazon is the biggest client, that baffled me, right? So that's the fundamental, the fundamental infrastructure of all of these companies servicing large companies that needed to be changed. And that's where we saw a big opportunity.
So maybe to restate that. So the opportunity you saw was basically that there are so many legacy players. They were all pretty bad. Yeah. And despite the other companies that were already out there, you thought there was an opportunity to do something still different, or at least take a piece of that pie and differentiate enough. Like, so then how do you go about, even if you can build a product that's different, you still have the secondary problem as a founder of doing go to market differently, right?
Absolutely.
So you get called up by, if I'm an Amazon, I'm head of HR at Amazon, I'm getting called by every single, Amazon would be the number one account for any salesperson in the world to go land. So they're all calling up saying, our product's the best, go use it. Yeah. You still have to stand out. So how do they verify?
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's kind of shocked me in this industry, because a lot of these payroll companies, especially, even in the US, apart from two companies, They haven't even implemented, a plan for account linking and, automated banking. Nobody even has like, embedded payments in there. And that really shocked me. Like, literally Gusto and Rippling were the only two players when we started out had that functionality.
Yeah.
And what we saw is like, okay, Gusto's great. They've done an amazing, but they only serve companies that are like lifestyle business. 90% of the clients are less than 10. 90% of clients will have 10 employees or less.
I didn't know that they're
absolutely.
I knew their focus was sort of on small businesses.
Absolutely. Micro SMB, amazing platform UI UX, but only works for micro companies. And they will actually literally, I spoke to like 3 or 4 companies. They're like, oh, Gusto kicked us out. And I'm like, really? Why? We started digging deep on that and they have that limitation issues. Rippling also doesn't scale really well for larger companies. They have some limitations around 200-person companies.
So this is what I've always said.
Right?
So few is on that front. Like, why do you think their platforms, like these are pretty new? I mean, Gusto's been around for a while now, but what about those platforms made them? Why are their platforms unable to scale? Right? They're still tech platforms. Why are they not able to scale? I'm sure we built it for scale. Parker Conrad, I'm sure would say that at Rippling, we built this for scale. You can run your company up to 10,000 people on Rippling or something. Like, I'm sure.
Yeah, I would challenge them on that if they can do it. But Gusto started in 2012, right? The tech stack that you have available in 2020 versus 2022 is completely different, right? At that time, people have to like make a decision to like, either, feature or scalable, right? And that's why you have these legacy companies, they prioritize scalability so they don't have a lot of features in UI and UX. Gusto prioritize UI, UX and features over scalability. And that's why they serve that market. And they've done an amazing, job serving that market. But Gusto, like companies for large companies, there's still like massive amount of, opportunities in the companies that are growing really fast. And Rippling has a unique value prop, right? Because they are selling finance and IT as well as thing. And if you go talk to a company that has 50 plus employees, they will tell you like, oh, we don't want a one vendor that does everything. It's too much of a risk for us, right? It's a risk. There's like a vendor management kind of like risk management that comes up as you scale, and it typically starts at like 100% company. And they don't want to be dependent with one vendor because what if the vendor gets hacked, right? And that's very true in this day and age, and that's what we saw an opening where if we could, and we don't do the IT stuff, we do finance and HR. That's our value prop. But for slightly larger companies that are coming off of Gusto and coming off of Rippling, that's our big, and ideally the international, that's what we're going into. So for us, any companies, 50% company, 2,000-person company, there's a huge opening there. Because once you cross 2,000-person company, then you have the workday of other, like you go in a very different space.
Yeah, no,
but we're focusing on that.
So you and I go on a long time about the HR platforms because I find it pretty fascinating and a cool space. And it's one we pay attention to in my company as well, too. Although we partner obviously with you all, but walk me through the business decision. So like, okay, so Neural starts, it's you, your wife. We should talk more about that, by the way, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you start Neural, you see this opening in the market. What do you go do immediately? Do you go raise money? Do you go?
So what we
your old team from Harvest? What do you go do to go build this and tell people, hey, we're going to go do something I've never done before and start a payroll company?
So we had this idea about like, building, moat around our company, right? And how do you build moat? So for you to build moat, like, in this space, what we saw was the payment innovation was lacking, and we're very familiar with the payments, right? I worked in banks. I know how the money moves. Nabin was very familiar with that as well. We even tinkered about like a blockchain-based payment system as well. In fact, we have like in stablecoin, payment rails already neutral as well. So what we decided to do is like, okay, this is what we're going to do. So this is our use case. We're going to build a finance and HR platform for slightly larger companies with the full payments embedded globally. We're going to offer 6 or 7 different products so that they never have to leave the platform, right? So they can start like, day one and they could be with us for IPO. Our platform has to scale. So we could be able to run 10,000-person company in the platform as well because we'll grow with our customers because we're taking a long visit. So we put this narrative together. We went to VCs and like, this is what we're building for. I think we raised that $10 million in a week because they basically loved what we were trying to tackle here, right? And basically we got the funding, and so it was just Nami and me at this point. And we got some amazing, fintech investors that have invested with us, right?
How much do you
Inspired
think the idea versus you guys being multi-time founders and having a
It's
successful
both.
method?
I think it's both. We're tackling a space that hasn't been started for a long time. There's like Rippling and Deal are also like, kind of coming along in 2022 because we started in 2022, right? And we also had this whole idea about like, tackling this set of market that we're really going against the legacy companies. There are point solutions there. And also what we saw is like a lot of this PO and others, there's like an infrastructure problem, right? A lot of these POs are running on the same infrastructure, like, and we have to change that and we'll change that. So we spend a lot of time building the infrastructure for the payroll and the payments. And once we have these payments, rails globally, we could just add different use cases on top of it, right? None of the payroll company can do that because that's not how they started. They started with one product, and then for them to launch another product, it's going to take them at least a year or two. For us, because we started with the payment rails first, adding these use cases is like a month, a month problem, right?
So why? So, but once again, like going back to okay, it's fine. You raise money, great. Raise money, you convince people right away. Raise money, you got $10 million as you and your wife.
Yeah.
Then what? Who do you?
So we needed, So we needed like now engineers, right? And then this is during pandemic. We were in New York. We couldn't find them. None of them are here either. They're distributed. So we actually went to Austin. We found our first technical hires. He came out of a CrowdStrike. Great security background. We needed that. And then there's another person we recruited. He was part of the Acorns team. Harvest team. He had a deep payment background and AI background, so we recruited that. Now we have a 4-person team, and we basically said, well, now we're going to build it. And then, by the way, we told everybody that we're going to build for 2 years. Like, it will take us like at least 2 years to build the infrastructure that we think is going to last for the next 50 years, and we're just going to do that. We're not going to have any revenue for 2 years. That was our pitch from day one, and that's what we wanted to stuck to. Even with $10 million, hiring 20 engineers in the US is like very difficult time, right? And you're going to burn for money really, really quickly.
Yeah.
That's where we saw an opportunity to go to Nepal, where there was amazing engineering talent now. Everybody's STEM educated, they're amazing coders. They're like 90,000 contractors. They work for foreign companies from Nepal today.
Wow.
And they're like massive, there's this base of engineering talent there. And what we did was we went to Nepal, all 4 of us. We set up an office. We went to podcasts and TVs, and we basically told them what we are building. We got a flood of people coming to work with us, right? And we recruited about 16 people in about a month, including product designers and initial engineers, apart from the 2 tech leads that we hired in the US. And we have to teach them the US financial ecosystem because they already know how to code, but they didn't know the US ecosystem. And by the way, I think Rippling did something like that too. They went to India and they built like an use.
Did you talk up when you were raising money? Did you talk up that fact that you probably were going to hire? You had this connection, inability to hire overseas talent. Well, I mean, obviously,
actually, no, it didn't come up
in background, but he obviously managed to do it. But he's also been a very successful founder in that space before.
I think his CTO was, from Indian descent, and that's how he did it, right? So for us, our background definitely helped, and we're able to recruit like talented engineers in Nepal because we know everyone and anyone there, and we were able to get the best out of them. We didn't really have to do a lot of talking about this during the fundraising because it just happened like so fast. Like just literally everybody loved the idea. Some of these investors were meaning to put money in Harvest. They didn't have a chance. They missed the boat. So it all kind of like came really, really quickly for us. And we closed the round on a safe, like within 2 weeks of the start of the process end to end. So we didn't have to go into that level of details, but that was our idea anyway, because even at Harvest, we used, engineers from Ukraine. They were amazing, because Ukraine was amazing, but we couldn't use them, at this time because they were in war. But we always had this idea of like, using foreign talent.
So, okay. So you got great talent, you have the team. Who's leading product? Who's figuring out what to go build for those 2 years? You keep your head down, go build. Who's running that? What things do you put in place? How do you make sure you hit those goals and metrics? So you can go tell your investors, okay, look, we spent 7 million out of your 10. We hit the metrics that we said we were going to hit. Now we need to go to market and prove that there's actually buyers. Like that's always a risky bet because like 2 years, a lot can change. So what did you go about building? How did you focus on getting it done? Do you feel like you hit your metrics in those 2 years? I mean, so now you're going to market in early 2024. What does that look like in building?
Yeah. So I think, Nami and I ran both. I mean, she was a product manager for this amazing company back in the day that was acquired by Twitter for about $1 billion. I
Which
think
company
it
was
was
it?
Mopal ad tech company and whatever it's called.
It's very good. Yeah.
So she was the head product manager for that company that was a rocket ship, right?
Which
So
was the head product manager?
she was employee number 11 for that
Oh
company.
my gosh, good for her.
So she has this background, like how to build these things.
Team
Or like so exactly, and and a couple of these other tech founders, they have an amazing background too. Like Serene actually sold the company to CrowdStrike, and it was at CrowdStrike. I think employee number 55. Raveen was an amazing engineer, AI engineer at TransUnion. That he was at Acorns and one of the amazing backend engineer that we can find. So the team was really awesome, and I knew exactly what to build because I saw this in front of my days at KPMG in terms of the payroll infrastructure and payment infrastructure. So we actually, about a month, like we spent a month like designing what we're going to build, what products we're going to build. And then we trained the folks for about a month in terms of the US ecosystem and how the payroll works and everything else before writing the code. So it's a 2 to 3 months process of just put everything in Figma. Like this is how we should exactly build, right? And these are the products that we're going to build. And after that, it would just like go, go, go. I think we were able to build like 4 products in 9 months, payment rails and everything's up and running. And we tested out for a long time, right? In payments and payroll, because it's so minute details that you have to test it out. You have to do a lot of that. So we had some beta customers to be able to do that. And we did that and we tested for 6 to 9 months before we actually went to market and started selling that first thing. Because once you go to the market, you always have customers telling you, I need this, I need that. You're going to get like very, very, distracted, right? We wanted to build at least 80% of what we think is the future. And then we'll basically incorporate some of the feedback and add all the features for the last 20%. That was the idea. So we had all 5 products up and running by the time, we went to the market.
So you go to market. How many people, how big is the team then? And are you running go to market basically?
Yes, basically I was the one sales guy and basically said, if I can't bring in $1 million by myself, there's no business. So I did that. I think,
by the way, that's a good rule for every founder, at least in B2B space. It's like you kind of need to be the first sales guy up to the first million in ARR, or
not necessarily. It really depends, right? Because you can kind of sense the momentum once you go to the market, right? And I kind of sense that. I hired my first SDR when we were like, halfway into the $1 million mark. And I kind of had the momentum at that time, like, okay, this is actually working really well. People are responding to really well. And, and there's a lot of demand for it, right? So, but I still wanted to get to that number. So I think we got there in like, not even like 5 months of the start.
Wow, so it's the first time.
Yeah, great time. But I also had this, like last year and a half to talk to a lot of people as well about building the product, right? So that helped us a lot. And then once you get to that, we started hiring tons of salespeople.
Okay, so how many? So
today, fast forward, like for 2 years, I think the team was very static, about like 22 people, right? So from day one, first 3 months to like, first 15, 16 months was like 23 some people. And then, in the matter of like 4 or 5 months, we doubled. Now we're about, 60 people by the end of next week. We doubled or we actually tripled our size since the beginning of the year. So we started at 23, now we're 60 people, and we expect to be around, I don't know, somewhere around 100 people by the end of 2025.
That's crazy.
So it is growing pretty fast. We have onboarded a lot of customers, small and big. So some of them are large enterprise customers, some of them are small customers, most of them are in between. And these customers are growing, and they are, they come for one product and then they immediately go to 2 or 3 other products.
So for that sales team building that out, what are key things you're finding that you need? And actually, I'm kind of curious too, because you build obviously these teams overseas and have a lot of people in Nepal. Do you find that you need to have salespeople in the US, or can you have sales?
So that's that was the difference. Our product and engineering team was at least the lead were here, but product and engineering team was in Nepal. We needed to have like everybody in one place. That's the other thing for us, right? Because we started with like a distributed team and did not click, did not work because the complex thing that we're building, it's very compound, 6, 7 different products. There's a payments and payroll. So we needed to have everybody in one place. So they all, zive really well. And that was the thought process for us, which is why we picked Nepal because we spoke the language. We go and we basically pick people to come and work for us. But for sales and market, for sales, you have to have people here because one of the ways I started selling in the beginning was I used to go to a lot of these conferences. We started with the partners like our CFOs, CPAs. I showed them the platform, how it made their life so much easier. That's how we gain initial traction because in payroll, the enemy is the time, right? So everybody's like, oh, you're new. I don't think, your system is refined and blah blah blah. So we picked the partners and we basically sold it to them, and that became that they bring more and more clients.
What was the key thing about? I mean, partners I find to be really hard sometimes for entrepreneurs to get to activate. In a sense, those partners. What are key things that you found were successful getting partners to resell your product? Like, how did you convince them? Because once again, they're also getting pitched by everyone.
Of course. I think the multitudes of products that we have in the platform. Like for example, somebody who are just using Gusto, there's just like focus on ACE or Gusto payroll. We could offer like the payroll, the PEO, the EOR, the contract, the neural pay, like payment products, and we're setting revenue with them, right? So it was a good. They're also getting more revenue from us. They don't have to lose clients to their I guess competitor because they can offer all of these things in one platform. They can service them properly as well, so that not everybody wanted that, but there are a lot of customers, a lot of these partners, they loved that, right? Because their clients were global and they saw this issue, and they also wanted to be more operationally efficient, right? And if they can do everything for their clients in one platform, it also made their life easier. So
But
it was just that sort of selling that again.
But I mean, like, that's sort of what everyone would say is like, our product's going to make your life easier and better. So was it just that actually it was true? Like, I don't know what.
It was actually true because a lot of the platform you see, there's just like one product, right? So when you have 6 or 7 different products, you don't need another platform, right? And that made their life a lot easier.
And then once again, for the salespeople, why do they need to be US-based salespeople, you think? Is it because there's great talent?
So yeah, there's great talent everywhere. In fact, we have like a couple of people outside of US right now, they're more on the SDR side, but in the US, like initially, and it depends, right? For our business, right? Because if it's just a software based, like developer friendly, all the APIs, like you could have anywhere in the world, it really doesn't matter. In our business, fortunately or unfortunately, the cold calling still works wonderfully well, right? You call like finance people, HR people, operations people, and that's how we get a lot of the business today is cold calling. And cold calling, you have to be here with and if you are here, I think you understand the culture. You are able to book more meetings, and that's why we wanted to have the team here. And then also, we started to see what clients wanted to see or meet each other, right? And that kind of physical interaction helps us close more deals in being in person, and that basically led to like having the sales team here.
And when you think through being an entrepreneur overall, what are the biggest challenges, the parts you love the most? I mean, like if you're going in person, you're head of sales in a sense for the whole company, you're on the road maybe a lot, me going to conferences. Like, what are the parts you love and what are the parts like, man, this is like, it's pretty freaking tough being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, the initial days are very tough, right? Because, especially for us, we're just building the product, and then, the economy was crashing down in late 2022, right? It was tough. Is he going to come back? How long it's going to take? Are we going to go? And there are lots of thoughts that will come in. That's really tough until you go to market, test the product. There's always an anxiety about like, is it going to work or not? Even I don't care, how good of a family you are. There's always that. Like I think Elon Musk, tell you that he saved 2 of his companies from brink of bankruptcy, right? Yeah. So even for him, like it's true for every single one of them. So you can't take that lightly, and same thing to us as well. So that was scary in the beginning. Because fundraising was the easiest part, like building product and going to market, making sure actually getting the clients is the difficult part, right? So until you have that, you're always like, what's going to happen? The second thing is also, as being in a startup founder is like it's also very difficult to like recruit people. There's a lot of competition, and you want people to come in and join the company. It gets easier for the first couple of hires, but once you get to 10, 12, 15, 16, it starts to get increasingly difficult. because at that point you can offer a lot of equity and things like that. And so, and also like salespeople, I found it difficult to recruit for the startup companies because they're like, why would I come to you because you don't have any name?
Absolutely.
Right? That has been the difficult thing for us is actually recruiting people in the beginning. Now we have a really amazing sales team, but it took us a while, right? It took us a while. And one thing that I learned is like hire slow but fire fast. I think that's the only way. That's the only way we're to work in startup.
Are there
And so far, it has worked well for us.
are there certain things that you do to try to hire better, like questions you like to ask, things you try to do, and then how do you know when someone's ready, when you should fire someone?
Yeah. So obviously, we tend not to hire for experience. We tend to hire for skills because I feel like, we're not selling rocket science here. It's something that they can easily learn. But if they have the rigor, the mentality, the founder DNA, those are the people we hire the most. Even in the engineering team, we have a lot of like failed entrepreneurs that we've hired. And these guys are amazing, right? Because they don't need a lot of directions. They can sense a problem and they have that DNA. And that's the type of people we want to hire across the board because it's going to make our life easier. Because one of the things that me and Nami, we have to think about is like we have this big, bold vision, right? And if we are too much inundated with the day-to-day details, that we're not going to be strategic, right? We have to be there all the time. So having these type of people who are like, self-motivated, they have like sort of what we call like a founder's DNA that'll help you a lot to scale the company and build the culture.
How do you then, as a founder, how do you make sure you're focusing on the right items, right? Because as you said, like very easy.
It's always a challenge, it's always a challenge, right? It's always a challenge. But once again, I think, bringing in people, having them understand, the true value of the company and true culture of the company, and then kind of like training them, like this is how we want it to work. So we take a lot of time during the training because I think training is very, very important for people to get going and giving them guidance, right? We want to challenge them, right? We don't want to, babysit them all the time. And that is difficult. Like, we always struggle about this, right? But what we typically do is we have some days where we want to block ourselves away and basically think about, okay, what is the company? This is what we want to do. Are we in the right track, right? So you have to take the time to be able to assess those. And it's difficult, like even block yourself for half a day. And it's crazy because you are like, oh, what's going on? And somebody's coming, right? So we
Try
try
to
to
make sure. So, I mean, you're doing that stuff, but how do you still make sure you're focusing on the most critical things on a weekly or monthly basis, right? Because there's so many different distractions that could come up. Like there's a million conferences you could go to. There's a million
absolutely.
podcasts you could be on. There's a million product decisions or hires or recruiting. There's a number of things that you could do. How do you try to make sure you're only focusing on the key ones and then handing off or delegating the rest? Like, or do you do that?
Yeah, so delegating is an art, and I think so we do delegate a lot. Like as a founder, it's not difficult to delegate. It's very difficult to delegate actually, but we want to make sure that the people that we're bringing in, at some point, are able to take more and more responsibility, and they are looking for that, looking for more and more responsibility, and that actually makes it easier. But it's always a constant struggle to maintain like to maintain that balance, right? But we listen, it there's no like science behind it. You just have to assess the situation. You have to assess the people whether they are able to do that or not, and we constantly evaluate what we should delegate, what we should get involved. And we have found, because I've managed a lot of people in the past as well, we kind of sense like, okay, who's able to do certain things, and then start to challenge them to do other things. And if they make mistakes, that's okay, right? And our job is to make sure that they make mistakes, learn from the mistake, and don't make that mistake again, and then learn from that, right? And that's we try to encourage that. Yeah.
And okay, so I wanted to jump around really quick to run out of time. Walk me briefly through like what's it like building a company, running a company with your wife, your spouse. Same with your brother. Like what are the pros and cons of that? How did you manage to make that work?
The cons is like you're putting everything in your own basket. If it doesn't work out, like there's no guarantee that it could work out. Like you could be, so that's the con. The pros for us is really I had a great time at Harvest with Nami, and then also for the limited time that Nisal and I started Nepal Collective, I also had a great time. So I thought I could actually work with these guys to be able to do that, like, with my spouse and brother. And at Neural, we have a son, was born in 2019. So we also wanted to make sure we raise him properly. And if we have two different startups, it's a nightmare, right? So we also took that into consideration. We also wanted to spend some time outside of US. So all of that, there's some compromise, and all of that basically led to us, like, putting our expertise together to build the one company as opposed to building two company, but we build a larger company. So that's what that mission actually drives us all the time. But then our responsibility is a little bit more separated as well, right? So I do most of the sales and marketing. I focus on that side a lot more. Nami focuses on work with the engineer, product manager, making sure we have the product and this and that. So it's a little bit separated as well, and that helps us kind of like coexist too.
Who has the final say if something goes wrong, or someone has to make a decision in your?
It depends. It depends on what's the problem, right? If it's more around like in engineering and product and UI and UX, I tend to give her she will make that decision because she's more knowledge, she's more experience there. But in terms of like what product to build, the sales funnel and what clients and revenue and pricing, I tend to make those decisions. So we have like.
And how do you hold each other to account? So in other words, if let's say the product is delayed, and that's her responsibility and it's delayed, and you're like, what's going on? Or vice versa. She's like, hey, you project that we're going to have this many millions of dollars in revenue right now.
Yeah, it's accountability. Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Absolutely. So, and then we basically, look into like, okay, what went wrong, right? Because the only thing that we could do is like fix it going forward, right? And there's no point arguing about like, finger pointing. It's about like, okay, if the product is not going well, what didn't go wrong? Did the engineer didn't do the work right? The product manager, the designer. So we tend to get into the problem and try to fix that. Same thing on the sales, right? So what just happened? Like, why didn't we thought we were going to get to this? Why didn't we get there? Or, is it somebody not working? Or is it this? Or is it that? We try to get to the problem and solve that. We are both open about that, right? And I think it's like, it's being honest about the problems, but the start is all about problems, right? Every single day we're solving different problems. So the honesty and you have to basically, get down to the actual problem. And if both are opening up about, what's the real problem, then only you can solve that. And we have a really good bond on that.
So essentially not blaming each other, but trying to figure out the core underlying issue.
Absolutely.
So going back to family for just 2 seconds, how do you guys also manage to both be co-founders of a rapidly growing company and in raising a child? Like, how do you break that up, and how do you make sure you give time for that important part? Sort of, or what is your life? Is your life basically like work and take care of your kid, and like that's it?
Sometimes it blurs, right? Sometimes it blurs. Definitely, like Monday to Thursday. I mean, we basically have some time set out on the weekends that we don't talk about business. We have some time that we give it to Nirvan, which is our son, to make sure that he's also getting attention. Frankly, right now, because now we have actually built a team, so we have like a head of sales right now. We have head of operations. We have, 2 engineering co-lead. We have a product. So we have a one layer of kind of like a management team already in place. So that makes it a little bit easier because we're focused a little bit more on strategic and not necessarily on tactical things on a day-to-day basis. So that allows us to like, operate on our own schedule at the same time, also give time to both of us and to Nirvan as well. But yeah, it's once again, time management is very key as the startup founder, right? You have so much going on, and you have to focus on the bigger problems sometimes. And also you have to, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So because it's a marathon, the idea that you have to work 24/7, it's not true, because if you do that, you're going to burn yourself out, and we don't want to crash and burn, right? We have seen tons of stories of companies going like parabolic and then crashing it down.
I've invested in some of those.
Right. So we basically said our day one that is not what we're going to do here. But we're thinking long term. We want this to be a generational company. Let's build it right. And if we get to the revenue 1 quarter later, not that we're relaxed about that, but for us to do it right also means like the tech and everything has to scale, right? And we don't want to crash and burn. So we take that approach. And the people are, without people, there's no business, right? So we also don't want people to be working 24/7. We want them to make sure they also have a life. We want them to stick around for a long time, be more productive, more smart work rather than hard work. We preach that. So yeah, there's a lot of things that we do, but once again, I think, we don't want to be in a situation where crash and burn, and something that we, both want to control that, right? And we're growing at a nice pace, but not, crashing and burning.
What is so last question for you that I asked everybody in the show. If there's a single piece of advice that you can give to every single founder, either to yourself when you were a young founder or to yourself just in general, like what is the one single piece of advice you would say to focus on to do to be that excellent entrepreneur?
I think, at the end of the day, you have to focus on solving a problem, right? And what value that you are creating. As long as you are working towards that every single day, listen, sometimes it's going to be very difficult. And the more difficult it is probably the right decisions. People look for like easy way out. If you're looking for easy way out, it's probably not the right decision. So focus on solving the problem, focus on, adding value. If you do that consistently, I think you'll be successful.
Yeah. I actually think the consistent part is key. People are too inconsistent. You don't realize they do the buildings over time, no matter how fast it goes. And the few, you look at the Facebooks of the world, like, oh my God, it happened overnight. And look how big they got. Even they took a long time, but it's being consistent and sticking with it. So I agree with that. Nabin, how can folks find you if they want to get in touch? Where they?
Absolutely. They can, my email's like nabin@neural.com, NIURAL.com. You can go to LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn as well as in Twitter. I'm in conferences, we have an office in New York City. So if people want to come and grab coffee with me, I love doing that. I also angel invest. So anybody have great ideas and think, I'll be a great addition to the cap table, let me know as well. I can do that too. Or if you just want like some advice, I'm more than happy to do that as well.
Excellent. Nabin, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Your time is precious. So thank you for giving me and my audience some of it. And really appreciate all the lessons learned.
Thanks, Adam. It's been great. Thanks so much.